Sadly, a lot of salons have closed down in the past couple of years following the pandemic. Many have been sold, and others have simply been shut down. Now, you might be in a situation of contemplation, wondering if the time is right for you to sell your salon and move on to the next chapter. Or you might be someone who sees this as an opportunity and is interested in buying a salon or thinking about that next chapter in your career. In today's episode, we speak with two former salon owners that sold their salons recently and talk about all the ins and outs as well as the important considerations. So stay tuned. Welcome to the Salon Scoop, a podcast by Salon S.O.S. I'm your host, Scott Moon, the founder of Salon S.O.S., and I'm obsessed with helping salon professionals live their best life. In this show, we shop talk all things salon to bring you real-life stories, debates, entertainment, and inspiration to help you find happiness and success in this beautiful industry. If you work in the salon industry in any capacity, this podcast is open to you. So set down your scissors or rinse out that toner and let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Salon Scoop podcast. I'm excited about today's episode because we're going to have twice the learning with two wonderful guests. We're going to get the scoop on everything that goes into properly selling your salon when you no longer want to be involved. Now, stay tuned for a future episode where we discuss a different form of selling, which would involve selling shares inside of your company to staff as a retention strategy where you would stay in the business yourself, which is a totally different approach. I feel extremely grateful to have the two women joining me today. They each have a wealth of industry experience and a lot to share about their experiences as they were very, very diligent with their sales process. But what I like most about these two guests is how much they each care about serving our industry. I've known them both for quite some time now. They've been excellent industry leaders in their respective regions, totally different parts of North America, as we'll find out. But they continue to find ways to serve the industry, even though they are no longer salon owners. So I know they won't hold anything back, and they'll share the good, the bad, and the ugly truths when it comes to selling a salon. Before we get into the details and the stories, could you each maybe just please take a quick moment to introduce yourselves to our audience? Maybe Shelley, you can start, and then Donna.
Yes, my name is Shelley Linthorne. I'm a 42-year vet in the hairstyling business and in the Ottawa, Ontario, Canada area. I'm the former owner of Beauty on Bank, which I opened in April 2011, and I sold in March of 2023.
My name's Donna Huston. I'm from Placerville, California. My salon was Adagio for Hair in El Dorado Hills. I too am a veteran of 40 plus years. I tend to lie about how long I've been doing the beauty business, but we had the salon for 10 years and I sold in 2023.
Nice. Thank you both for the introductions, and thank you both for being here to share. Okay, let's get into the juice. And I want to start with an obvious question, which is, what was the trigger or the main reason that made you decide to sell at the time that you did? What made you think, you know what, the time is right for me to actually do this? Maybe we'll flip the order. Donna, you can start, and then Shelley.
Okay, that's a great question. For me, it was the life path, my career plans. Adagio was my fourth salon, so I had had 3 under my belt already. And we were halfway into our second 5-year term. And what was in front of me was the next 5 or 10 years. And for me, it was really thinking about my team and what would be required. What does life look like 10 years from now, 5 years from now? What does the business world look like? How's our client sustainability? How's the team doing? And ultimately, it came down to, for me, I had to be honest and ask myself, am I up for this for another 10 years? Can I give the same amount of energy? Because that's really what it takes. And I kind of had to be honest with myself and said, maybe it's time for me to enjoy the rest of life, since I had already had 3 salons and this was number 4. Why not see what else is in store and how else I can serve the industry? So it was a combination of kind of my own life plan, as well as Elise kind of pushing me to start thinking about things.
That sounds great. Yeah, that's awesome. For me, it was basically, I was hoping to have a salon for a fair amount of time. It's funny, I named it a certain name for a street in Ottawa, and I was hoping to maybe have a couple more locations, but being a service provider, as well as an owner, is quite a bit of a challenge. So I just found it a little difficult to try to do, one, make sure that my clients are getting value for their money, and two, making sure the salon ran smoothly. So I just felt maybe that I don't want to say couldn't handle it anymore, but as I was getting a bit older, maybe I had learned what I needed to learn and it was time to pass it on. So that's when I decided to sell.
Amazing. I think, a lot of people out there will probably, resonate with each of your reasons, each of your stories. Let's jump to this. How long did it take you from the time that you first communicated in some way that you were selling? I don't know if it was, officially, published somewhere, if you just sort of put the word out. So the first time you communicated that you were selling until the time that you actually sold, how long was that process?
Well, in my situation, I think I was hoping that I could sell it to one of my staff. So almost from the point that I opened it, I knew that I was going to be planning an exit strategy at some point. So I wanted to have a solid, viable business operating where it was basically, here are the keys and there you go, and I ride off onto my horse. So that was where I started. But the reality was it wasn't that easy, and it wasn't until I decided to actually hire a friend of mine who's a former salon owner, who turned real estate agent, and we kind of collaborated together and came up with a very structured plan, and it ended up being exactly what I needed to sell.
And how long did that process take once you sort of were like, okay, I'm selling, until it was actually sold? How long was that?
I would probably say it was, well, definitely within like under a year for sure. I had tried it a little bit before with a company that specifically sold businesses, and that one I didn't find as serious or as good as this person. But again, this person is a hairstylist, so definitely knows a lot about the industry, and so I'd say within a year for sure.
Fair. And Donna, how about on your side?
Yeah, all in for me, it was a little over 2 years. I took my time in certain steps of the process, but all in, I'd say it's about a little over 2 years.
Fair enough. Okay, so I think this is an important learning right off the bat, because some people are like, okay, you know what, like I think it's time, I'm gonna sell, and they might think that it's gonna happen in the span of a month or two. And the reality is that it can be a long process, and you definitely want to be planning and preparing for it, ideally, if you can. So I think that's something right off the bat that's important for people to sort of be aware of. Shelley, you mentioned that you were a service provider. You were a hairstylist as well throughout this process and during the time of sale. Donna, how about yourself? Were you a service provider, or were you just an owner?
Yeah, I'd retired from behind the chair about 2 years before I sold. So
Fair.
right.
Okay. So that's good. So that's going to give us two different scenarios here as well to sort of look at some of the differences, because I think that'll be important. So Donna, maybe take this one for us and say, what was the first step in the process for you when you were like, okay, it's time. I'm not ready for this next, 5-year journey, 10-year journey. I'm going to sell. What was the first step in that process?
Yeah, the first step is actually an emotional one. It was for me just to really come to grips, because you can't really pull that trigger unless you're ready to let go. And for me, it was being willing to let go of the relationships of my team. We are a very close team, and the network I work with, I just knew that once that got out, so you really have to do some soul searching and be really ready. For me, the next step was marketability. Do I have a product a salon company that looks attractive? You have to be attractive. You can't be in debt. You can't be making a gunshot decision. Like things are just kind of hard. And I just want out because we have those days too. And that's not the time to sell. And then you got to get your team around you. You know, you have to have a really strong team of like CPAs, accountants to really make sure that what you are selling, because it will get investigated. And it's really important to make sure that everything that you're presenting is accurate. So there's quite a few steps in the process. And then, of course, the valuation.
Fair enough. And yeah, we'll definitely get into that. Shelley, how about yourself? What was the first step in the process for you? Anything different from what Donna mentioned?
No, I think it was pretty close to what she was talking about. Yeah, I think being a service provider just gave me a little bit more of a push because again, I was kind of trying to do two things at the same time. So if I would have stepped back from the chair, it might have been a little easier. But yeah, I think I want to say I got to the point that okay, that's enough. You know, I can't take it anymore doing the two.
Mhm.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, that's really
Okay,
hard.
let's get into that evaluation part because that's a common it's an emotional decision, like putting a value on what your business is worth, something that you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into for so many years, and pricing it somewhere that you feel is, you know, the value that you've put in, but also it has to be a price that someone is going to be willing to pay for it at the same time, and they're not going to see necessarily all of the you know, what you've put into it behind the scenes, and all the time and energy and sweat. So how do you go about doing a proper evaluation of the price point?
I think that's such a good question. It's a really important question, and this is where I would highly recommend that you take your time. My salon company was valued 3 times, just because I wanted kind of a range of understanding. It gave me a range, like I just said, of, you know, what's the least amount that it could be worth in this given time frame, and what's the most I could ask for. And then again, your point of it's all relative, because it comes down, it can be worth, you know, millions, but at the end of the day, who's going to buy it? So, you know, like I said, number one, debt. I was so grateful that we were able to operate debt free pretty much the entire time, and that was not easy to do. But if you're in debt, you're just not ready, because I mean, who wants to buy a salon there's a reason why you're in debt. So you got to clear that up. You got to be marketable. You know, how does your salon look? You might have to do a quick little refresh and get it. It's not unlike selling a home. So you have to kind of get that ready to go. And then once you do that, you got to get your accountant and your CPA together. And what they're going to do is take a really good look at your financials over a given time frame. And for me, I wanted to look around 5 years, you know, back, and kind of 2 years forward in a forecast and see where we are. So once you get that, and you understand it yourself, which, you know, we've heard many times, know your numbers. Well, there's never been a time you need to know your numbers more, you know, then, and understand it completely. Then you need to reach out to an expert. I highly recommend that knows how to value businesses and companies, and has a really good resume of recommendations of places that he's sold or they have sold. And talk to those people. How did that go? You know, were they knowledgeable? What's the legal side? Once you get that together, you're going to come up with a number. And really, what the most important thing, ask yourself, what are you selling? Because you may think to yourself, well, I'm selling my salon. No, you're selling a company that has lots of different layers to what you're selling. You may think, I'm selling the chairs, I'm selling the furniture, I'm selling, you know, the inventory. There's actually way more to that. You're also selling your goodwill, which is essentially your client list and how business has done. And then most importantly, to be reminded of is there's one other thing, and that is, if you've created any type of a training document or anything like that, that's intellectual property. So you have to ask yourself, are you selling that too? So there's lots of different ways to sell, and then you just got to decide, nope, it's just the assets. I want a quick sell. It's just this, or no, it's the goodwill too, or it's everything, and that includes intellectual property.
And would your sort of evaluation expert and your CPA help you evaluate the price point of those? Because that's pretty difficult. How do you value like how much, the intellectual property of, training guides and programs is actually worth? Are they able to help figure out an appropriate price or value for that?
They gave me ideas, but I will tell you that I had to do quite a bit more research when it came to the intellectual property. And it comes down to what was your worth creating that? You almost have to look at, if I hired someone to, create a training document, let's just say, or standard, operation manual, how you do things, how do you open the salon, how do you close it? And that's valuable, by the way. It's super valuable because a new owner is going to want to come in and they're going to run business just as smooth, because obviously you've been successful. So they're not likely to want to change things, at least a smart buyer wouldn't. And you need to have those things in place. So therefore, if I was a consultant being hired out, is kind of how I approached it. So how long did it take me to write these things? How important is it to the salon company to actually do it close to the same way? It'll never be the same way, but I would say a good place to start is looking into consultant fees for the amount of time you spent, creating those documents.
Great insights. Shelley, give us a little bit of perspective on your side. You said you worked with somebody who, was a former salon owner themselves who turned real estate agent. How did you go about determining the valuation, the price point of your salon for sale?
Well, he's been a long time colleague and friend, as you know of him, Scott. He's been pretty deep in the business side, more so than even the hairdressing side of our industry. So I had a lot of respect, or still have a lot of respect for this person. And with him turning real estate agent, it just made it, he was very much in investing and everything like that. It wasn't just kind of like, I don't want to say a fly-by-night hairdresser that, kind of, partied his profit away. He's a serious business person. So I trusted in his knowledge, but also I'm looking at a time, I listed it in 2002, roughly at the end of it, or something like 2002.
2022, you mean?
2022, sorry. And, we had just gone through COVID and, we're still kind of coming out of it. And I'd learned of so many salons or hairdressers roughly around my age, maybe a little younger, a little older, just closing their doors. And I was saddened by it. And I was like, I'll be darned, I'm not that hard up to sell it. I'm just going to stick it out and know that what I did build was, was of good value. And there were very few salons in the area that actually had the setup with, loyalty programs and social media and everything that we had, besides, of course, great products and great services. We were definitely out there. So that gave more value as well to the person who was purchasing the salon, and it put me in front of the others in my immediate area. So yeah, I think that really thinking things through, but we have to be realistic. I mean, I know my home is worth, whatever. I know that, my husband is, worth so much to me, but we have to be realistic as well. And when we're pricing things, and we have to understand that, like, these buyers are out there taking a risk, especially post-COVID, and buying something that they're hoping they can pick up and continue with. And that was definitely a struggle in business to continue like that. So I personally feel, and I'm sure Donna, you feel the same way, extremely fortunate in being able to have sold during these very unpredictable times.
Mm-hmm. Agreed, 100%.
Yeah, makes sense.
I did for sure, though. I did nothing on the, if I want to say, on the cheap or on the taking a chances. I definitely had my accountant, always had my accountant with me all the time, well worth the money spent. And then I hired a great lawyer as well, who managed to get, me through all the ins and outs and the understandings of selling a business, not a house. I sold a lot of those. A business is a different story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, a house is a little bit easier because you look at previously sold houses that are comparable in terms of, number of bedrooms and bathrooms and size and square footage and, areas. And so there's a lot more comparables. But when you're buying a business, you're buying essentially a future stream of revenue. right? Like that's a core component of it, which is hard to really evaluate unless you take a really, really close look at the numbers. So whether you're a seller or a buyer, you really have to get a good handle on what is the real, the real financial situation of the business and what are the honest and true projections going forward. Shelley, I want to ask you a deeper question. Because you were a service provider yourself in the salon, a great part of the salon revenues were coming from you as a hairstylist. And I'm curious to know, how did you factor that in to the price of the salon? Because if someone's buying the salon, then you are no longer there providing those services and that revenue for the salon, right?
Right, but I had started backing away from the chair a couple of years prior to that, looking for other opportunities and still hoping to run the salon to a certain point. And so my revenue had been spread out to the girls, and thankfully 90% of the clients that were in the salon had been coming to the salon since the day it opened, and of course from me many years prior to. So they trusted my judgment as far as being an owner and a service provider, that anybody in the salon would be definitely, I always said nobody owns a client. It should be the salon owners who actually, and I say that with being a stylist myself, is that like the salon owners are the ones that put the money out, the effort out to get more clients for you. It's up to you to keep them. But if we've handed you those clients, they're the salon's clients, in my professional opinion. So my revenue was down, it was spread out to my other staff. So in fact, as long as the new owners or whoever would be coming in would, hopefully still play the same way, and not play, but you know what I mean, run the salon the way I had run it, they had a great opportunity to keep the staff and all those clients.
Makes sense. Okay, I wanted to point that out because that could be an important component for somebody looking to sell. But if you represent a large percentage of the revenue because you are a stylist or an esthetician yourself, that could have a significant impact on the price you can expect, because they're not buying you, you're going to be leaving, and that means that there could be a challenge in terms of those clients. So make sure that you understand the percentage of revenue that you are generating personally, and make sure that you and your accountant and whatnot are factoring that into the price point appropriately.
Well, it helped when I started because I did had a full solid clientele. So I could pay the rent pretty, I don't want to say easily, but I could pay the rent, I could cover the rent. I knew how much money, and thankfully from business coaching that I took part in, is that I knew how much money I had to be making in order to open the door. And that's really important. Don't just think that everybody's going to fall in the door when you purchase a salon or you open a salon, because it's not necessarily the case if they don't have trust in you as a business person.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Okay, let's talk about, so you've done some of the first steps. You've figured out how to value the right price on the salon business. How do you go about finding buyers? What was that process like for you? Let's skip over to Donna to kick this one off, maybe.
That's an important step. Obviously, it's not easy. I will say that is, at least in my experience, because you have to find the right buyer. And so right off the bat, we had, quite a bit of interest, but that doesn't mean they're the right buyer. Are they going to take care of your team? No one's going to be you. And you do have to be objective and step back and say, well, what's the best case scenario? And your heart's definitely involved still. So the first thing is, well, what are these people going to do for this team, and what does the team need, and how, so that it'll be a successful transition. And that's always on the forefront of your mind. So, and then there's discretion involved, because I was so far out and I gave myself plenty of time. I didn't want it blasted all over, social media. Hey, I'm selling, everybody. And I certainly didn't want to tell my team at the time, because I wanted everyone to feel safe and comfortable and really walk through the process. So it came down to a broker. He was also involved in the valuation, and it was a wonderful network of accountants, CPAs, and the broker, who also was a valuation expert. And so he got it on the market, the commercial market. And that's when we started getting calls. And it's a very interesting ride because you get all sorts of people. And then I would say it ultimately came down to my team. And you gotta keep your ear to the ground. You gotta, stay involved with your networks and kind of start hinting. It's almost like a dating process. And ultimately somebody from my team bought the salon. And it was kind of ironic and funny because had we started there in the first place, we could have saved each other some time. But you have to be discreet, but you also have to keep it open because maybe there are people that in your salon company that would love to have it. They just can't figure out how to do it, or they just don't understand if they have the right amount of money. And you can't have those conversations until you start opening the door and letting people know you're selling. So it's a delicate balance.
If you could go back in time, Donna, and do it, because that is a delicate balance and it's tricky. I understand what you're saying. You don't necessarily want to just announce that you're selling because that could cause some instability with the team, but there could be very likely people in your team that are interested in buying, and it prevents them from like leaving and going and starting their own thing somewhere else. So if you could go back again, would you do anything differently in terms of how that communication went?
I would. I think I would have not been so afraid to be a little more vulnerable. I feel like I was an open book owner. But I think I would have shared with them my life path and maybe some of my career choices and things that I wanted to explore because it kind of has a little something to do with your salon company being happy that you're a successful owner. Think of it in that stream of thinking, and they should be happy that you're successful. They should be happy that perhaps you're even well paid and your salon company is doing well, as they are too. And so since that was the mindset at the time, I should have trusted maybe a little bit more to just talk to them and say, guys, listen, I'm getting really serious about retiring, and if anyone has any ideas or wants to come talk to me about that, I'm going to be looking for my retirement exit in the next 2 to 3 years. What I did was hint at it a lot. I would joke about it a lot, and I think I joked too much because we like I said, we could have came to, well, shoot, I want to buy it. You do? Oh, okay. Well, we could have had that conversation at least a year earlier, I think.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, Shelley, I'd love to hear your story a little bit. So, you figured out the price point and you're ready to go. How did you start communicating that it's for sale? Like, how does that work for somebody out there right now who's thinking about, selling? Like, what do they have to do?
I did many times talk to the staff about, having them take over the salon or the business. I did that for several stylists that I had had. But they were just a little bit younger, I think a little bit more vulnerable, a little more whatever. So they never, it came right up to almost the very end when I did finally sell it. I mean, for me, it got to a point, it was like, we got to get off the pot here because, I don't know. Because with a buyer, you can possibly have a situation, which I think is a question that you're probably going to be asking, Scott, is that, sometimes buyers want you to hang around for a couple of years afterwards. So, you got to take that into consideration on, how much longer do I want to work behind the chair? So for me, asking my staff and being pretty serious and having meetings about it, it did come to that, but it never materialized. So that at that point, this is where I let my gentleman help me, the realtor help me sell it, because he has, again, from the industry and does have connections in the industry, and that helped a lot as well. So he pretty much looked after it once I had put it out there to the staff. I didn't want to make it too loud. I didn't want clients getting uncomfortable, as Donna was saying earlier. So at that point, he kind of took over.
Okay, so you started internally first and sort of probed with the team if there was anybody that'd be interested. And then once that turned out negative, then you used your broker to essentially be in charge of communicating it and putting it out there into the marketplace and getting essentially visibility of the fact that your salon was for sale.
That's right. I think it would have been come out maybe differently if we just hadn't gone through COVID. I mean, myself and my team went through COVID together, so there's that instability in the marketplace for, and it's still kind of lagging a little bit now, but it's better than it was. So I think that probably scared them off to doing it. So that's an unusual situation, but we sold at that time, right? So that's,
Yeah.
it might not be relative 10 years from now.
So Shelley, you sold to an outsider, whereas Donna, you sold at the end to an actual existing employee. Shelley, I want to ask you this question. How did your team feel once they knew, right? You had like finalized a deal with some outsiders. There was going to be an outside person coming in to be the owner and the new boss. And I'm sure you had developed pretty strong relationships with your team over the years. What did you have to do to try to manage that transition so that there wasn't just a complete walkout where people said, well, if Shelley's no longer here and there's some new people, like, we're not interested?
I think for me, I basically made them know, even though I was getting ready to retire, I wasn't retiring tomorrow, and that I would be around for quite a while. And I definitely felt like not only would we be an asset to the new owners to help them, but everything builds so much better with a team. And I planned on staying. I wasn't breaking up the team. I was going to be staying on. It eventually didn't come to that point. It was unfortunate it ended in a different way. But that's okay because, I was also a bit of a pushover for a boss. And I think when the new owners came in, they were being a little bit more assertive on how they wanted the business ran, and not in such a soft way as I had it, that I think it might have scared the staff off once the deal was closed.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to consider and try to manage as best you can, for sure. Okay, Donna, question here for you. What was one of the biggest challenges during the entire process for you as a salon owner, as an individual? Maybe and an important consideration that people should be aware of that you discovered the hard way.
Yep,
Let's make it easier for people.
such a great question. I was absolutely shocked by this challenge, and that was the landlord was not on board at first with the buyer. And, everything that I had, and for no reason, actually, let me just make that really clear. This was a solid buyer, everything that you could possibly want in a tenant she offered. And I think for him, it was just personal because I didn't really think about involving him in the process. I didn't go to my landlord and say, hey, in the next year, I'm going to sell. And what he wanted was a closer relationship to kind of walk that process with me and vet, certain candidates that were interested. I thought it was going to be the opposite. It's like, oh my gosh, this landlord is going to be so happy because I'm bringing him this qualified buyer. This person works in a salon company as an independent contractor. Therefore, they've had their own business. They can certainly prove all their. And he just looked at me with deer in headlights, and basically said no. And I said, what do you mean no? And he said, you can sell your company. That doesn't mean I have to lease to them. And I was terrified and shocked. And so that's really important. Know the landlord personally and know the process in which the landlord company will allow a new tenant to take over your business. Now, it was kind of if you don't mind, Scott, I'm gonna elaborate for just a minute. By the time the sale closed, my lease was within a month of ending. And so it kind of got to a standoff, which is, well, if you don't want to accept this person as my new buyer, I guess we simply close. And that would be a shame for the community. And that was tough because I didn't want to have that relationship go that way with my landlord. I wanted him to be successful, their company to be successful, the salon company to do really well, and for it to be a closer relationship. And ultimately, I'm happy to say now it is. I just think he wanted to be involved in the vetting process and go through the whole thing and say, okay, I give you my blessing. But just know that your lease is very different than selling your company. Those two things don't go together. So be aware.
Very interesting. I never would have thought of that. Okay, thank you for sharing. Shelley, anything on your end that was kind of the biggest challenge for you that maybe you didn't realize during the process and you found out the hard way, and we can save our listeners a little bit of a struggle?
Oh, that's a I could have 5 different directions, but it's not going to. I don't think I really had that much of a struggle with it. The only thing I had a struggle with was the staff really questioning whether they were going to be the same type of salon owners as I was. I was very much a bit of a pushover for as a salon owner, and that was a bit, I don't want to say it to my demise. I mean, I'm proud that I'm a kind, generous person, but I think that when people come in with a bit more structure or want to have structure and watch the expenses more than I did, I think that really scared the staff off and thinking that they were going to be harmed. So yeah, I think for the most part it was pretty easy. On the point of the lease with Donna, I'm just going to quickly say that in my situation, I did bring it to the attention of the landlords that I was planning on selling. My lease was coming due, and they pretty much asked me to sign a 5-year lease. With having a 5-year lease or something longer than just a few months, it makes it more attractive. So they told me to the buyer, which it did, and I did spend extra money on the landlord's with the landlord's lawyer itself there's some kind of heading on how to redirect the lease. Although I'm still on the lease, I wouldn't be the first person that they come to if they defaulted. They would go directly to those people before they would come to me. So that made it a little bit easier for the landlord situation.
Oh, good to know. Okay, let's flip the tables for a second and try to look at things from a buyer's perspective. You both went through the selling process, but you obviously have a unique perspective of the whole process. You can probably objectively know what you would look for if you were buyer. So for the listeners out there that are maybe considering, buying a salon or buying into a salon, can you share some advice of what you recommend they should be looking for, they should be weary of, they should be cautious of if they're looking to buy a salon? Donna?
That's also a great question. First and foremost is the salon company growing? And why is the seller selling? That would be the first question I would ask. Why are you selling? Because oftentimes, once again, we all know, Shelley can agree, we have our rough seasons, and sometimes you just like, I'm out of here. And if that's what's going on, although that would be hard to get them to admit, but there's clues, which is, the salon may have had a turnover recently, a large turnover. There might not be as much inventory on the shelf as there should be. So kind of going and scoping it out would be, I think, the first step, but you have to ask yourself, is the salon growing? The second thing for me would be sustainability, especially, in our life and times right now. What does the future look like? And a good indication is asking the question, if you can, what's your repeat business like? How long has your longest customer been here? What's your average lifespan of a customer? We know that in most cases, people stay in salons 2 to 3 years. But if they've got, oh my gosh, we've got this really high percentage of people that have been here a long time, that's a really good indication, because you're going to get their kids and their grandkids coming in. So I'd be looking for that. And I think the last thing that would be important is, how much more are you going to have to invest in buying the salon? And what I mean by that is, there's a sales price, but then there's your startup capital, and you have to have enough capital for the next year. And that's just to run the business. So is there also, does it need a refresh? Are the chairs working? Has this person invested enough that you could literally walk in, and because you have a huge investment when you first start out. So is it going to need any further investment past your working capital, past how much you paid for it, to invest to make it marketable and attractive to new guests?
Nice. Shelley, any additional thoughts or advice that a buyer should look out for, in your opinion?
I think if I was out looking, yes, I completely agree with Donna. I mean, having software today is so important in being able to see exactly, hit a button and know exactly how many times Mary Jane has come in, what, her dollar value, what she spent, blah, 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 the retention, all that stuff. It's so important to have that at our fingertips as we do today compared to the old days in a book. But I think the other thing is to if you're scoping to purchase a salon, or if you're planning on opening one, is to have a plan. You have to have a plan to be able to open. You have to have a payroll structure plan on how your staff are going to see how they can increase their incomes. I've been part of Summit Salon for a long time, which is, I believe, throughout North America. And that structure really, really does work. It's worked in chain salons across the country, and all over North America. If there's structure, then you know where you're headed.
Love that.
That's what I would be looking for if I was purchasing.
Mhm.
Totally makes sense. What was the feeling? And actually, no, what's the feeling maybe initially, like right after you sold, maybe like within the first, sort of few days or week? And what's the feeling now, sort of, almost maybe about a year or so removed from the sale? Just personally, how do you feel in retrospect, no longer being the salon owner? And what should people expect, personally, emotionally from the experience?
For me, when I left the couple of days after, actually driving away the day that the money went into my bank account, I just, for some reason, just physically felt my shoulders dropping. It was the strangest feeling, and I'd never experienced it in my life. I guess it was just the build up to it, and then it finally happening and letting it go. I had to stay for 3 months in order to get them on their feet and get them like into the routine of the business. And I stayed for an extra 3 months. What was hard is finding that the salon wasn't operating in the way that I had done it. And it was easier for me to leave than to watch it. Not that there was anything being done that was right or wrong. It's just not the way that I had done it for 12 years and that worked and that allowed me to sell the salon and have, active, great staff and companies working with me. So it was just best that I leave. I am working in another salon right now as a more of a mentor, and I find it's difficult for me not to want to say what I have to say, but I'm happy that I'm not the one that has to make those decisions.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the blessing in all of it for sure. Yeah, the first days and weeks were nerve-wracking. Very happy for the new buyer because they knew the new buyer. Very happy for my future, but also mixed emotions, 100%. It was a roller coaster, and there were days that we were just really joyous and looking forward to the future, and then there were days as like, well, things are going to change, and that's kind of sad. So just know it's a roller coaster. I stayed for a little over 2 months as a consultant to the new buyer, and life is really good. It's hard to let go. And again, Shelley agrees. I know she will. This is the attachment to your team and what they meant to you, and hopefully what you meant to them, and the history and all that stuff. So you do have to let go. You do have to let go and know that they're going to thrive in their own way going forward. And if they don't, they'll have lessons that'll be a part of their story. But you've done everything you can to set them up, and then take time to pat yourself on the back. I think that's important too, and say, we had a good run, and I did the very best I could for everyone and by everyone. So, cheers.
I think it's time for reinventing, and I've been busy doing that, and I'm having a blast, and I feel as much confidence in myself now as I did when I was first starting out. So it's not ended yet.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. Love that. Okay, last question for each of you, short and sweet. If you had one piece of advice to share with a current salon owner who's thinking about selling their salon, they're in that sort of mindset that you were in back, not that long ago, what would that one piece of advice be that you'd share?
I'd say patience. Just take your time. Don't be in a hurry to sell it. just be patient, trust the process.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you just said. It's all of that. And then I would say, keep doing your homework. There's a lot of homework involved after a long day's work. You can't put your homework off. You have to know what's going on very, very well. You have to get way down into the process and understand what everything means legally. So it's a marathon to get there. It's not a quick finish. And then top that off with what Shelley said, and be patient. And then enjoy the process, because this is a choice that you've made. So even though it's going to be difficult in some ways, look forward to the day that you are sitting there retired and you've had a successful sale.
Yeah, and I'll probably add to that, just based on what you've been saying, is to, surround yourself with qualified professionals that you need, whether it's the accountant, the lawyer, a broker, because it can be daunting, some of these things that maybe you're less experienced with, less comfortable with, but there are experts out there that can help. So if you are taking heed to these ladies' advice, be patient, do your diligence. Don't just hire the first person that you see on Google as a lawyer, but do your diligence to get yourself a good partner that can kind of help you through the process. So, well, all I can say is, wow, this was a really, really fun episode for me. A little bit different type of episode than we often cover, but I thought that it was a really relevant topic in today's world, how our industry is going. So there's just so many insights and information to chew upon. And I hope that people, both in the potential seller category or the potential buyer category, were able to gain a lot of information here. Shelley and Donna, thank you so much for sharing with us today, for being vulnerable. You both obviously continue to be leaders, and your willingness to share so openly about what is typically a very private transaction, right, I think will be beneficial to so many people out there. So I really want to thank you and acknowledge you for that, because really, typically, this is a very private thing. So I really want to shed some light on it for people.
And thanks for sharing it with everybody.
Yes, thank you for getting the word out. It's important to talk about, and there's no guidebook. At least I couldn't find one. So thank you again for having us. And Shelley, congratulations to you. I know life is looking bright. So it's exciting times.
True enough. We will include contact information in the episode notes for each of our guests, in case you want to reach out to either of them with any follow-up questions that came to mind. I'm sure that they'd be more than happy to sort of answer or respond. You can always reach out to us as well as your resource here for all things salon based on your specific situation. So hope you enjoyed, got some insights from this. Thanks so much for listening, everybody, and stay stylish. Thank you so much for listening to the Salon Scoop podcast. This show is produced by Salon S.O.S, a digital marketing agency by industry professionals for industry professionals. If you want simple and affordable solutions for any of your salon marketing needs, such as websites, client loyalty, Google search rankings, social media, or more, come visit us at salonsos.ca or on Instagram at salon.s.o.s. If you want to hear more episodes like this and help us continue to bring the industry great content, it would mean so much to us if you would support us in one of the following ways. Either share this episode with one other industry professional, and rate the show on Spotify, or write us a quick review on Apple Music. We want to hear your feedback. If you have follow-up questions or ideas for future episodes, please reach out. DM us on Instagram at salonus.s.o.s, or hit us up on our website again at salonsos.ca. Again, thanks so much for listening. Now go get your hustle on, keep smiling, and we'll catch you on our next episode.